Golf with Kevin and Jake Haime. Here we go again, Jake.
We are here.
Jake Haime, sitting in my studio with you. I'm excited, Jake. We've got a little bit of a rain day today. It's been a beautiful fall here in the Northeast. The weather's been spectacular day after day, and I'm off to Ireland next week.
We've been really lucky.
Hey, I'm off to Ireland next week.
I know, and I'm off to Cabot for the first couple days that you're off to Ireland, and we get to finally play some golf, which is nice.
Yeah, someone was asking me the other day. I played the Royal Ottawa, which was in beautiful shape. Had a nice day over there, and that was my first real social round of golf this year in Ottawa. So we've had a few coaching training sessions, 9-hole playing lessons.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's it. You're right. This is our time of year now to have a little fun and get into it. So for the last 4 years, your mom and I, Lisa and I, have been bringing a group of 16 over to Ireland to play 7 days of golf on the world's best layouts, and we're off again. And to say it's a highlight of my year is an understatement.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It'll be interesting to see if anything feels different after the British Open this year. Probably not, but it'll be interesting to see if the vibe is.
Feel different. We're not even heading up that way, right? We always do the Southwest. When you go to Ireland, you can do the Southwest, or you can do the kind of the North, which includes Dublin a little bit, and then head up north. You can also do the Northwest, but less people do that. There aren't as many interesting things. But it's a wonderful, wonderful experience, and we'll be playing Ballybunion, Lahinch, Old Head, Waterville, Doonbeg, some of my favorite courses in the world.
God, I gotta get back at some point.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting and relevant. So today, everybody on the show, we're going to talk about, 25 years of radio. Today on the podcast, we'll be talking about adjusting your game for fall. I think it's so important that people are a little more thoughtful about their games to score better, and that, you know, in the fall, you do have to make some substantial adjustments, even to the way you strike the golf ball and your short game, how you prepare before you play. A lot of little things can make a big difference. So we're going to talk about that today. But I got to tell you, our trips to Ireland have affected my game, playing links golf. And to some extent, Jake, you know, we spend a lot of time out at Cabot as well, a couple of times a year, and I know you've played a little bit. Playing links golf really opens up like a clamshell opening to ball striking and the way to play the game and think about the game and everything. And
yeah, I know even from the one experience in Ireland that I was fortunate enough to have in 2014, and then, you know, going to school close enough to Cabot that I've experienced the course several times, and going back once since, and now going again, luckily. It totally changed the way I see my ball flight as well. Totally. And, you know,
totalies?
Yeah, I think I could have put 4 in there and it would have been justified.
A lot of totalies.
You know, I think I was always really, and I still could describe myself as a high ball hitter, but I grew up in parkland golf around here and never had a reason to hit the ball lower. Made no consequence, right?
I think you hit the ball so hard too. I mean, with spin, it's hard to hit it low when you have 120 miles an hour of driver club head speed.
Yeah, that's true, but that wasn't true before I went to Ireland, right? Before I got to that point where I was through university, I wasn't a long hitter when I was young, and I still hit a high ball and landed on the green, didn't get much roll, and that was my game. And I think that apart from maybe wind being too affecting to me, I never had any reason to change it. And after going to Ireland, I've been on this pursuit the last 5 years, which I think I've finally got a handle on it this year, to keep the ball flight down a little bit. And it's totally changed the way I see golf, and
yeah.
I would even argue how I would teach, because it showed me how dangerous just ignoring it and hitting it high as far as you can be.
You know what's sad to me, Jake, a little bit? I want to talk a little more about Ireland. Remind me, too, we've got to talk about my 3-wood driver experience for our listeners, because it's a neat story. But so many people play the game the same way, and they're just scratching the surface of the game, because they just try to, like, practice their swing, and they might do a little adjustment, like stand a little further from the ball, move the ball up a little bit, and they always shoot 90 and 100, and they just go 20 years of the same kind of stuff. And some of them leave the game even and get frustrated, which frustrates me as a teacher. But when you play links golf, and the reason we throw Cabot in, by the way, everybody, in the conversation, is when you play on fescue sand. So firm sand turf with fescue grass, the kind of places where you can putt from 40 yards off the green. There are very few of them in Canada. Even links, so-called links courses in Canada really aren't links courses, right? The layouts are linksy, but the turf is not linksy. And that European, that Irish and Scottish and English idea along the sea where you can putt from everywhere, it's a totally, you have to react to Mother Nature and learn to hit the ball differently and think about the shots more. So nowhere in the world than Cabot Links and over in Europe, you can be 80 yards away. And here, like you said, you grew up from 80 yards, you grab your sand wedge and make a 3/4 swing and knock it on the green somewhere. Maybe you take a gap wedge and play it a little back in your stance and hit a little lower. Those are your options. In links golf, you could chip an 8-iron, you could putt, you could throw it up in the air to the right of the green and let it bound off a bank. I mean, there are no number of things you could do to hit a ball in the green. And it just makes you think about how your club hits the ball, the angle of the club face, the path of the club, the trajectory you need. And all of those things are so much more fun to plan out and think about and so much more interesting than just hitting the ball.
Well, it has you play golf instead of hitting balls on a golf course, right? And I think that to me is the distinction in my brain, and that's why you can take that and also apply it to courses that aren't links style wherever you live. I think sometimes people talk about how brilliant links golf is, and many golfers go, well, I don't have the opportunity to go play that course, at least not anytime soon, so how is that relevant to me? But the tenets of what we're saying are relevant no matter where you play golf. It's shaping shots, it's planning it, and it's thinking about the course at a more core level than just, I'm going to hit a straight shot, and this is where I want it to land, and this is what it is.
Yeah.
And I even had an experience with that this week. I had a younger guy, he's about 25, he's a pretty good golfer. He, single-digit handicap. He's been coming to lessons for me for about a year and a half. And very good golf swing, but he's also like 6'8". So it's very hard for him to coordinate the timing sometimes, and he has some high rounds and some low rounds. And last lesson, I asked him, or I guess 2 weeks ago, last lesson, I asked him, what shot do you hit on the golf course? Because I just try to hit it straight. So why don't you plan a go-to shot? Because if you're noticing that you're sometimes just hitting weird shots out of nowhere, if you have this go-to shot, then in a pressure situation you can go back to.
Yeah, nobody does that.
It'll help. And so then this week I had another lesson with him. And he started off the lesson by going, the last lesson was revolutionary. And I go, why was it revolutionary? He goes, it was literally just thinking about the go-to shot thing you said. I realized I was just hitting a couple yard draw. I played for it every hole, and it totally changed the way I saw the golf course.
But very true. And the other thing I'd say, Jake, even so the next lesson you give him is that not only, it's not just the go-to shot. That's your bread and butter. But if you get up on another hole, cut a 3-wood in there and try to hit that shot. Once golfers start thinking and strategizing a little bit.
That's how you take it to the next level, for sure.
And that's what links golf forces you to do, right? One of my things is you and I do so much fitting, and we're on the launch monitor all the time. And I mean, I've been teaching 30 years. I've had a launch monitor since 2005, but it took quite a while to really understand and learn. I mean, I really think as a child, a junior golfer, and even as a young amateur, I was a really good player, but didn't have a clue about most things, like the fact that a sand wedge launch angle is 30 degrees. I think most of us would think, well, if I'm hitting a 60-degree sand wedge, it's a 60-degree angle up in the air.
Yeah, and there's no way to know that.
No, until the launch monitor came around, right? And spin rates and spin loft and attack angle and everything it's taught us. But I think the most important advent of it, discussing launch angle in relation to spin, in relation to ball speed and clubhead speed. So if you have less clubhead speed, you've got to hit it higher and get it spinning more to stay in the air longer, right? If you have less, you end up with too much spin. And just launch characteristics has been so important. But along with that has been the idea of trajectories and windows. So you hear them saying this on the tour all the time. Kevin Kisner, I remember a few years ago, he almost won the PGA. That was the one Justin Thomas won, I think. And they were talking about what a great player this Kevin Kisner was, that he hits the ball through the same window every time. And I knew what they were talking about, but I think a lot of viewers of the PGA Championship were like, what's he talking about, the window thing? But we basically play the game, and even when I'm fitting people, if you look at an apartment building and there's a second-story window, a third, a fourth, and a fifth, and you're deciding at what height you want to shoot that ball through based on the club you're hitting, based on the wind conditions, based on strength and speed of impact, all of those different things, right? And when I play golf, I'm looking through windows constantly. And it might be a window to the right to hit a draw, like your go-to shot for that young fellow. But you're not just standing there and swinging and trying to hit it and thinking to myself, okay, keep my elbow in. Okay, finish. You're not thinking about that when you're playing. You're thinking about ball flight, and you're thinking about trajectory and what you want to do with the golf ball. And that is like that mind explosion thing where you start really playing the game, right?
Yeah, that's a good point too, right? You want to work on your swing and mechanics on the practice range, and then use those skills you learn on the practice range to play the game on a golf course. I think sometimes people who are making the effort to go through a change, which not enough people do, but those who do then get on the golf course and go, I have so many things in my head on the golf course between the swing thoughts I'm trying to employ and the playing of the game that I can't keep it under control. And you also have to understand that there's a time and a place for both, right? On the golf course, you're supposed to be playing the game, strategizing your way around the course, and then when you practice, that's when you frankly work on the mechanics and fix your golf swing. And I think that fall is a brilliant time to do both of those things because, like you said, the adjustments that you typically make to perform in fall, which I'm sure we're going to get to in a second here, do tend to make you a more strategic player. And if you use those skills all year, you'd actually be a better golfer in general.
Hang on. They don't make you a more strategic player for most people. You need to be a more strategic player. We're more strategic in the fall. We make the adjustments. I don't think the average person does.
Fair distinction. I'm assuming that you're doing the changes, right? So with that assumption, let's say people take the advice. If you make those changes and you do the assumption, it will make you a more strategic player, maybe is the way I should have said that.
Yeah. So love links golf because it forces you to think and adapt and create. And, when we go over there with our high handicappers and they're 15 yards off the green and they can't figure out how to even keep it on the green because the lob wedge is impossible. The ball will just bound over the green. And it very tight lies, too, so people get scared over there. It's interesting to watch them, though. By day 4, they're pulling out the putter. By day 4, they're chipping, They figure it out. You need to do that in fall golf, too. So, you and I discussed a little bit today talking about the change in the weather and changes golfers need to make in the fall, and they're substantial. First of all, great time to play. Courses are in beautiful shape, especially in the Northeast.
I think it's the best time to play, frankly.
Yeah, wonderful time. Temperatures are great. You're not, sweat dripping down your back by the 12th hole. You don't have to worry about fatigue quite as much because if it's a bright, clear day in 16 Celsius, it's a little bit easier to manage yourself and pace yourself and enjoy your day.
I also think the courses are in the best shape because you have the unique combination that the courses have had all year to get them in proper shape. They're at the peak of that conditioning because they've had all year to figure out what happened, especially in the Northeast
like
winter.
Crazy.
They're still growing because of the temperature being high enough, and people are playing less. So they have maximum conditions with the least amount of players. So the courses are in the best shape you'll find them all year in the fall, and it is funny. People don't really pay attention to that.
Yeah, it is a different shape, though. So that's one thing I talk to people about, golfers about, when they ask me about the adjustments in the fall. So, it's growing again. It's not because it's because it's still warm enough. Once we hit a frost, it'll stop growing. But in the summer months, it goes a little dormant. Even with water and fertilizer, the grass slows down. Here we're on a slower cutting cycle. Spring and fall is when bluegrass thrives. So when you get around the green, that rough is going to be thicker and heavier and requires a better short game. It requires more club head speed into the ball, which means a little longer, softer swing. It means being a little braver, and being able to not flub those little pitch shots around the green. So that's one thing. But because the grass is growing and it's moister and it tends to rain more, everything's thicker and heavier, right? The greens are softer. The fairways are softer. There's more dew on the course in the morning. The ball doesn't roll out as much. So you have to adjust so many different ways to play golf in the fall, and I don't think many people think about it enough, but it's really important to adjust a lot of points in your game. So we talk about a bunch of them. We'll talk about a bunch of them today.
Okay, so let's start doing it though. If we set up that we have to adjust, what's the first adjustment you would make playing golf in the fall?
Well, I think one of the worst things that golfers are cursed with is ego. And in the fall, it's even exemplified a little bit. And what I mean by that is if you're in a situation where you're in between a 9-iron and an 8-iron, 8 out of 10 people will try to bust the 9-iron.
Oh, totally.
The good 20% of golfers will hit a softer 8-iron. And that becomes more important in the fall when there's more wind, when it's a little cooler, the ball's not flying as much, and when the green's softer and the ball can't release. So in the fall, more than ever, although I would always recommend the 8-iron over the 9, if you're ever golfers in a situation where you're in between clubs, always take the longer club and make a softer swing. That softer swing will lead to lower trajectory. It'll lead to better rhythm. It'll lead to better balance and consistency and probably a more well-struck shot. So if you're in between a 9 and 8, it's always the 8. In the fall, it might be a little 3/4 7 because you want to keep the ball below the wind and you want to make sure that you've got enough club to get there. So I'll give you my example. I'm 140 with a 9-iron, 150 with an 8-iron, 165 or so, maybe 152 and then 165. I'm in that range, right? 40, 52, 65. If I'm 143 today and there's a little bit of wind or the green's a little uphill, in the middle of July, I might try to bust a 9, although that's really not the shot, as I just said. The littler 8-iron's great. But if it's windy and you see the tops of those pine trees kind of moving around, you're best to take that 7-iron and swing back so your hands get to your ear or maybe your jawline, and then just bump it up there and keep it down under the wind. And like I said, I think you'll hit a better shot if you do it.
Well,
so more club is my first bit of advice for fall.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people should be practicing more. I think one of the reasons people don't do it is they never practice hitting 3/4 shots with longer clubs, right? They feel like that's reserved for their wedges. So they never go to the range and pick a sharp target and go, well, that target's 120 yards away. Let me pull out a 5-iron and see if I can get the ball close to the pin. And it seems like a silly thing to do because you how often do that on the golf course, but it gives you such control that you don't have if you always just hit full golf shots. I mean, there is something to be said, like you said, about having the confidence to just hit a full shot and have it go the right distance. But if it's 3 outside your average range, just because you've hit it 143 that one time, you shouldn't be hitting the 9-iron, like you said.
Well, so don't forget, too. So I'm saying, all things being equal, I prefer because of the wind. But even the cooler temperatures
will make the ball go shorter.
What if that green's like a yard up? Then it's actually playing 2 yards more. So your 142 shots now actually playing about 147.
Yeah,
right?
And the temperature is something that people don't consider enough. We see that fitting a lot. I see that fitting drivers especially. People come in the spring and the fall when it's a little colder, and they'll get a few less yards than they're used to on the golf course. And they go, I normally hit it this far. And I go, yeah, but you're telling me what you do in July. A lot of people would go, well, what do you mean by that? And, people don't understand that the ball compresses a different way and the face reacts a different way when the temperature is colder. So the balls physically don't fly as fast, and they don't stay in the air as long.
Pressure and
so
the weight of the air, everything.
So between
is
those,
the weight of the air or just the air pressure?
Well, when there's humidity, that's true, right? When there's humidity, there's a weight to it. The ball has to penetrate the precipitation hanging in the air, right? So all of these factors affect your ball flight, and I think as long as it's sunny, most people just go, it's the same as every other day. So it's one of those things that you need to adjust to as you go and just understand that it will be a factor.
Yeah.
I'm not saying grab your...
lots of club. I think the two biggest killers for golfers, 30 years on the teaching tee. Number one is ego.
Couldn't agree more with that.
When people exaggerate how far they hit it, and we always have that awkward area around the launch monitor where a guy tells me it's his driver 270 and the first ball he hits goes 238. And... he's thinking of the 270, like you say, in the middle of July, downhill, a little downwind. And the reality is it's a little cooler maybe when you're fitting him, or he's using a range ball with might account to 5% of distance, but you got to explain to him, don't pay attention to the 238. It's all going to be relative to your driver and every other driver here. But,
absolutely.
So ego's a killer, and that whole thing, and juniors suffer greatly from this. I guess everybody does, but juniors always want to bust that gap wedge instead of hitting that little 3/4 pitching wedge. It's an amazing thing to watch when we're at tournaments with kids. But I think ego's a killer. That's the number one thing that I think. And then number two thing is the patience to make a change and understand and to be strategic about a change. So you tell a person the club's coming a little from the outside and they're a little quick from the top, and why don't you try this little drill to do something? And lo and behold, you download their video, you go outside, they're already hitting the driver. They don't seem to have the willingness or the ability. It's like the 24-hour juice diet, instead of just eating well for understanding it'll take a couple of months to get where you want to get to. In golf, you need to think about the path of the club. You need to control your body motion, and a lot of that happens with these 3/4 swings we just advise people hit. So those are the animals that not just related to fall, but hit lots of club always, but really important in the fall. And then concern yourself more with path of club and solid contact than is this working with my driver? And I mean, we just see those. That's a little off topic, the patience thing, but it's so important that people understand if they want to get better, they need to start thinking like they're playing links golf, and they're strategizing and planning and practicing properly, like you say, hitting half shots and 3/4 shots and controlling their body and the path of their club.
And that's why I don't think
it's so
it's
important.
Off topic. I mean, one of the reasons fall is such a good time is not only because the conditions are great and it's a great time for weather to play, but it is a great time to work on your game. So that next summer when you're playing, whether it's tournaments or your money matches with your friends or whatever, and people are on the golf course, you play better.
Yeah, you got a bit of a free pass, right? You're not going to have a tournament till next June.
So this is now when you can change things.
All fall and all spring to make a change. So if you have to change that grip, there's no better time in the season as a Canadian to work at it. You could argue it's a 12-month-a-year season down in Florida, so they don't have that. But we've got this incredible time to kind of reset, work on our weaknesses, get a little flexibility over winter, learn a little bit more about our swings, and then break out next spring and be a new player. So a little strategy, a little patience, a little thoughtfulness, which are all great attributes on the course as well. And then that ego that they hit that extra club. All right, so more club, 3/4 swings. The other thing to say about that, Jake, is those smaller swings lead to better control of the club head and more solid hits, right? So you might just end up playing better. One of my favorite things to get our young coaching kids to do is you go out and play, and every time you have a shot into a hole, I want you to hit one extra club than you normally would, just to learn what it's like to hit control shots and control trajectory and fire the ball through those proper windows and control the spin on the ball. That's what being a golfer is. Some people play golf. Very few people are golfers. They actually plan and move their golf ball around the course.
Well, that's what I mean, the difference
thought.
between playing the game and hitting golf balls on a golf course.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that, right? It's the understanding that you're trying to adapt to the situation you're in, not just hitting whatever shot you normally hit and seeing how it worked out, which is what people do all the time. And some of that is ego too, right? People don't want to go through the pain that changes take.
Yeah.
Something for people to understand through all of these changes and even habits on the golf course, getting over the desire to hit the ball with a full swing and take the fact that you're going to hit some bad shots with 3/4 swings to start because you're not good at it yet because you haven't practiced. Your brain functions a certain way for a reason, right? Our brains have synapses that create bridges to make our lives easier, shortcuts as it were. So there's a reason I can grab a cup off a table and not have to look at the cup because I've done 1,000 of that, or I've done that thousands or millions of times. So my brain just understands how to do it. Well, your golf swing is the same. You groove patterns in your body and you groove these neural shortcuts in your brain to do the function without having to think about it too much. Because if you had to think about every element of your golf swing every time, you would be crippled by the activity. You couldn't do it. So changing those pathways and changing the way that your body wants to inherently work is difficult. That's why in so many lessons, people will do practice routines that are immaculate, and then they hit a golf ball and you tape it for them, and their swing's right back to where it was.
Yeah.
And they're flabbergasted, absolutely floored. They can't understand how they weren't able to fix it.
Feels fool you is what we say. It takes, well, they say 10,000 times for a habit, so Yeah, a lot of people don't want to put the work in. That's very true. You know what? Another thing that's kind of connected to that? I was actually chatting with a father of one of the kids we coached last night. You were teaching at the back end there, but he was saying, what do you think of the boys and can they win a tournament next year? And I said, well, boy A, he protects himself. Boy A projects self-confidence, but deep down in your subconscious, he knows that if he commits 100% to something and fails at it because he's just not good enough, and I think he's protecting his ego, so he's not really committing to working at it.
Yeah, it's funny. You saying, I know exactly who you must be talking about.
Boy B just needs to work hard and keep getting better, but he's putting the effort in. Now boy B, lacks a little bit of self-confidence in that he's worried what I think he might shoot or what the people who are playing in his group might think of his golf game. There's too much outside white noise with him. But the point I'm making with boy A is that a lot of people do that as well. They won't even take lessons, and they'll mock people who take lessons. Because what are you doing that for, Jim? Because they know that A, they don't have the willingness to make the change, the work ethic, which will disappoint themselves. They'll feel lousy when they look in the mirror if they know they should be working, but they're not, right? The second thing is they just won't take the chance. They won't get out on that limb that might break.
That's very true.
So they stay in their comfort zone, and they won't go out there and work at it, right? So that's a couple of things that happen with golfers.
And to bring that all back to the point we made, because I know I tangented a bit there. I think fall's the best time to do it. Because spring, you're hungry to play, you want to get into it, you're just thinking about the golf course and you're getting ready for it, you're getting your timing back from the off-season in the winter.
Yeah.
In summer, you're so consumed with your weekly game with your friends and men's night or ladies' night and the tournaments you might or might not be playing and that you can't do that.
Sometimes that's an excuse. Back to my ego thing. Sometimes that's an excuse, right?
That's fair as well.
You got to look in the mirror, be self-aware, and figure out why aren't you practicing? Why aren't you making the change? Why do you keep shooting 100 with a slice and you just keep doing that and doing that and doing that? So you need to kind of think about that. And anyway, back to fall. Okay, so number one, we gotta think about those 3/4 swings and trajectory control and making sure we hit enough club because the ball's not flying as well. And also because the ground is moist, right? So when the ball lands on the green, it stays there. That gets us into the short game. I highly recommend people club one down in the fall. There's a reality to that soft turf that when you pitch with a sand wedge or then pitch with a gap wedge, the sand wedge comes in a little bit steeper. It's a higher shot that lands steeper, so it's going to stop quicker on the moist soil. Even if the greens are still quick, in all likelihood with the extra rain and dew and everything, that ball's just not going to release like it normally does. So you've got to pay attention to the firmness, the moisture of the turf you're playing on, and the firmness of the greens and the speed of the cut of the greens, and probably gear down one club. If you'd normally use a 9-iron to chip, use an 8-iron. If you'd normally hit a sand wedge pitch, hit a gap wedge pitch, and understand that ball won't release as much. And I'd say it for two reasons. One is the moisture. The second one, Jake, is that the reality of life in the Northeast is a lot of greens crews get more skeleton in the fall because kids go back to the university, and you've got to cut budgets a little bit because there's less rounds played. So they're maybe not quite doing the amount of rolling of the greens they would normally do midsummer and whatnot, right? So I think for short game, you've got to really consider your trajectory again into the landing spot, where to land the ball. You might still use the sand wedge, but land it 5 feet closer to the pin, or change the club you hit and bring it in a little lower so it'll skip forward a little bit better. That's another big change in the fall.
Yeah, again, I don't think something that people think about because they don't necessarily pay attention to how their ball's normally spinning too, right? And again, it's a time to not to keep going back to reflect on your game, but it's time to reflect on your short game and start figuring out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And I think the nice thing about fall too on that topic, at least from a practice perspective, is I find it gives me a little bit of confidence when I practice my short game in the fall, because when a ball visually spins more on the green, when you hit a ball and you can see it take a little bit of turf and you can hear that spin, you know you hit it properly. And in the summer, when the ground's firm, it's harder to tell exactly how it's spinning. You can only see by the result. But if you don't know what a good result looks like, if you can catch that spin and make a little pitch and mark in the green and you hear that little bite, you know you're hitting it well. And I think it gives you...
Yeah, you also don't have to worry about the ball chasing out too much. You get a good little chip in midsummer when the greens are rolling 12 and she keeps moving and moving and moving, right? And you end up 15 feet past. It's a little easier now because you can be a little more aggressive.
So I think, from that perspective... So
what would you recommend? A little more aggressive shot, land a little closer to the hole, or use the next iron down? I guess every situation's different, but...
Yeah, it's such a situational question. I mean, I like playing the ball lower if I have the opportunity to. So I would typically say use less loft more than anything. I use my 60-degree wedge much less this time of year because I don't find I have the need for it. I like trying to employ a fairly simple short game so that I'm not adding extra elements of wrist movement and everything to it, reducing variables that have a problem, that could cause problems, I should say. And as a result, instead of trying to hit those shots deeper in the green, landing it farther away from me and increasing my risk of hitting it wrong, I would rather take a little less loft and let it roll out. And again, I attribute this time of year and doing that to give me the confidence with those shots that I might not play in the summer, and start employing it in the summer, and it makes me better overall.
Okay, let's get to the that shot I talked to. It was so funny this week, Jake. I gave a lesson to a guy, and he says, I can't really chip and pitch. And this is so typical of human beings. So we go over there, and 20 minutes of chipping. Oh, that's pretty easy. Oh, I love that. Use different clubs for flight to roll ratios, and we went through it all.
Yeah.
He got it pretty good. And then we go to pitch. And I'm like, okay, get the hands more centered, ball a little more forward, less shaft lean, little golf swing, let the club release past you, a little more elevated shot. There you go. That's a pitch. Hit a few of those, did pretty well. Pretty good little golfer, but just never took lessons on the technique and the specificity, is that a word?
Yep.
Of each shot. This is a chip. You put the ball here, you put your weight here, the hands go here, to build a little template for a short game. But hang on.
Which is really common, by the way. A lot of people do that.
Just don't think about it.
And for the record, I don't think we care about what you call each shot, but it's understanding where to put the ball placement and the technique to make sure you get the desired effect, whatever you choose to call
it.
It. Yeah.
I really emphasize with you guys in training that, and I was forced to do that as a young teacher, come up with a model to teach, because you got all these people coming for a short game lesson.
Yeah, we have to, for sure.
We've got a lot of feel and touch, and we can maybe use our wrists a little more and open the face a bit, but we need to teach a template, and it's built into a system, if you will, of this is a chip, this is a pitch, this is a bump shot, this is a lob shot, this is where you put the ball, this is where you put your hands. But it's really helped my game overall, and I think, all of ours in having these structured shots with predictable outcomes.
The more I teach short game and the more I teach more beginner players that have to fall back to the basics, the better my short game is getting.
Yeah, it's cool, huh?
Yeah. Because it reminds me to go back to basics and get very technically sound in those departments. And then all of a sudden you get shocked about how little you need the fancier shots, because you're like, oh, when I do the basic ones right, they do the job I thought I was trying to do with the fancier flop shot.
All right, back to my thing. 20 minutes of chipping, he can chip.
Yeah.
20 minutes of pitching, he can pitch.
Yeah.
You have any more questions? I got 5 minutes left in the lesson. Yeah.
Bunker?
What? No, although that does happen. What about if the pin is only 5 feet on the green and I'm in the deep rough just off the green? The hardest shot in all of short game, right? Oh, that's easy. Don't worry about that. But that brings me to the juicy rough around the greens this time of year. And I said earlier, the first thing I said about fall golf is you got to swing a little bigger in those shots. You can't chip that ball if it's in 2.5 inches of rough. You can't get your club face on the ball. You've got to open the face like in a bunker.
Yes.
And make a little bit of a swing and slide under it and pop it up in the air with really consistent but soft rhythm.
Almost like you're hitting a bunker shot, but using the grass as the sand a little bit.
Correct. It's one of the most difficult shots in golf, and everyone goes to the go-to. You have any questions? Yeah, how do I hit this shot? I'm like, well, practice for 1 million more hours, and then we'll talk about really being good at that shot. But kind of funny, and it happens a lot. The other thing I would say, though, Jake, is that think about it with your approach shot. The rough around the green is more difficult, which makes the front edge of the green a little more attractive, or at least not short-siding yourself. You got to be aware. I remember I played at Royal Ottawa. I only got trapped once there. And I swear to God, they put a bag of fertilizer around every green because the rough there is like so thick all the time, right? Very beautiful and green and lush, which is, I'm sure, what they're looking for at a course like that. But you cannot risk hitting it just through the fringe, being aggressive, and then having that shot. That shot is so tough out of that lush, thick rough.
Which is ironic because it seems like it should be the easy one. It's so close to the green, but it makes it exponentially more difficult.
I would rather be 50 feet short on the front third of the green to a back pin than roll just through the fringe and into that heavy stuff.
Totally agree with you.
And that's totally true this time of year. So, I'm saying hit extra club to get there. Your ball won't release on the green because the greens are softer. But we get into the the thinking and the strategy of the game. You cannot put yourself in that position where you're 5 feet off or 2 feet off the green and the pin's only 7 feet on. You're in big trouble all the time. But in the fall, when the rough is thick, it's even harder.
Well, and to double down on that strategic point, then if you do get yourself into that situation, you have to decide what your best plan of action is. And for most people, the best plan of action is not hitting that shot we just described and trying to put it to a foot because they don't have it in their toolbox, right? I think one thing that happens a lot to players is they put themselves in a bad situation by hitting a poor shot or a bad strategic decision. And then they feel like they have to hit the hero shot to get out of that. A perfect example is yesterday I had a lesson with a young guy who takes a lesson every week. He's taken a lesson every week this year. He's a 16-year-old kid. He's really getting into golf. He wants to learn how to be a pretty good player. And we've done several short game lessons at this point. And we had a lesson yesterday. And what we decided to do was have a little bit of a short game competition where we tried various shots that he hadn't seen before to see how he handled them
fun.
And strategize. And after about...
Great thing for people to do. Grab a Coke.
It's also fun.
Grab a Coke or a coffee, go out with a buddy, and just throw balls down in the rough and try to have a little contest.
Jack and I,
fun.
My younger brother, Jack and I, used to do that all the time. We'd play 21s, which meant, just like basketball, you'd have to call your shot. Whoever was close to the pin would get the point. I'd give him a spread because I was older. And whoever at the end of the round, or at the end of the game, won, we'd bet either if there was like a third chore, they'd do the extra odd number of chores, or first turn at video games, or a drink, or something simple. Just have a little bit of stakes to it, and you'd figure out what shots you were good at and try to use the shots they're bad at. It's a super fun way to get better. But back to the story. So he and I are doing this, and he started throwing the ball into very tough situations for himself because he goes, well, I don't know how to hit these. I want to learn, which is great. But then he was always trying to hit shots that he doesn't have yet. He doesn't know how to hit these shots yet. He's just getting started. And he kept leaving them short of the green because he tried to hit a flop shot, take too much rough. It would go short of the green. He has to pitch again. And then he winds up getting, up and down.
Double.
Yeah, 3 or 4 instead of me getting up and down 2 and maybe 3 sometimes. And at one point I said to him, look, here's your problem. You're not just hitting to the middle of the green on some of these shots.
Like not even middle of the green, but it's okay if the ball rolls out.
No, but our small lesson green is pretty small.
Yeah,
right?
It's okay if your ball rolls out 6, 7, 10 feet.
So you got to think of this, everybody. Put yourself in that situation. You're 10 yards from the green. You have a very tucked pin, and you have to hit a high flop shot from thick rough. You have maybe let's give you a 50% chance of pulling the shot off. And if you don't pull the shot off, you're short. And then you have that hard little chip that you just mentioned is almost harder in some situations. Do you try to do that, or is it just smarter to hit of a more basic shot close to the pin, and if it rolls out 15 feet, at least I have a 15-foot attempt at par, and you're guaranteeing the bogey instead of risking a double or a triple that we hear a lot.
A great part of strategy in golf is understanding your current ability. That's back to looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself. Are you really working at it? Are you committing? We talked about that earlier, but the other self-reflection thing is understanding whether you have a shot or not and what you're good at, and then keep putting yourself in the position to have the best chance to hit those shots you're good at, right? Don't try the tough ones, but also the strategy of saying, oh, excuse me, everyone, I'm going to hit front edge here because that's the least chance of making the double. I mean, people need... Golf is basically it's like you're a little magnetic pawn on a chessboard, and you move yourself around that 200-acre little board. There's a series of 18 little layouts. Just picture it as a game board on your table, and you got to move your little piece around. And you got to think about every shot and where you're going to move those little pieces based on the strength of whatever your character in your game has. That's what golf is. Get the ball around that acreage in the least number of shots. And that requires thoughtfulness and strategy and everything, right?
And again, that's where we loop back to fall such a good time to get better at that skill, because it presents a few unique challenges, things you're not used to dealing with, the thicker rough, the more wind, the more moisture, all of those things. So you have to use a little bit of that strategy to play the game at this time of year. And then it also has that lack of pressure we were talking about earlier of your Sunday game or whatever going on. So it's the time that you can afford to make mistakes trying to get better at that skill.
All right, let's talk. So we've talked about hit the putts a little harder because the greens might be slower, right? There's a little bit to that. You can be a little more aggressive putter. We've talked about the rough around the greens. We've talked about the moist turf and the extra club with the smaller swing. How do you hit it low? This is a good one. This is so funny. I remember when we brought you. So our deal, everyone, was when Jake graduated from university, he graduated with honors, never gave us a bit of trouble, such a bit of a pissy attitude when you were a teenager on occasion.
Well, I was a teenager.
Yes, I know. I guess, okay.
I think I get a pass on that front.
Anywho, no drugs, no booze, no missed curfews, no nothing.
I was quite the nerd.
Said when you were in your last year of university, you were going to bring you anywhere in the world you want to go when you graduate. What do you want to do? And you could have said, I want to go to Fiji and snorkel with whatever. You know, you could have said anything you want. You said, I want to go to Europe and play golf. So we brought you to Ireland. First hole at Waterville, 80K wins. And here's muscle-bound Jake after 4 years in the gym with all your guys at school. And I hit this little driving low, 10 feet off the ground driver down there, and it bounds forever. And you get up, and you hit the ball so high, and it just goes sideways forever. It was just gone, like
I remember,
a boomerang. And then
on the third hole, so that was the first hole. The second hole, not much better.
Is it bad that I love that day?
I remember the third hole is a par 5, I believe, if my memory is correct. And I remember aiming 70 yards of where I wanted my ball to be right, trying to get the ball to go into the fairway. And the ball curved 80 because of the wind. Yeah. And I remember just turning to you and going, I don't have the shot. What do I do?
So then... And you were a good player, but like you said, you grew up playing parkland golf. Yeah. And so then...
Apparently not an Irish scratch.
I'm like, no, you got to stay down through the shot and blah, blah, blah. Tee it up lower. And so you instinctively did what so many people do. You hit down at it. Yeah. And then it's almost sky marks, right? You're popping them up. Yeah. So that didn't work either.
Well,
so this is what I want to talk about today.
And we did talk about this. If you want to hear us, do a dissertation on the loft, everything, and how it affects the ball flight. We did this during the British Open recap too, talking about how launch angles and loft affect the length,
right?
And the Tiger Stinger, and
so it's okay to revisit. Not everybody listens to 100% of every podcast, but it's not about moving the ball back in your stance. I might move the ball back an inch with my driver.
Mm-hmm.
It's about keeping the loft off the face through impact and staying more what I would call on top of the ball. So it's really important that the legs don't go forward and the head falls back a bit. Yeah. You swing up on it. You want to be a little flatter through impact. And it's about having a low finish and an extended finish. I call it chasing through impact, right? You want to keep that club low. It's not about hitting down at it. So if you think of your club chopping down like an axe chopping wood, that won't hit it lower. That actually pops the ball up in the air. Keep the ball forward and chase it with that low follow through, and the ball stays down.
Yeah.
And swing easier.
It's reducing your dynamic loft, which is the loft you actually have at impact, without compromising the integrity of the hit, which is what hitting down does, right? When you hit down at it, you're covering the ball in a different way. You're compressing the ball into the turf. Lots of bad things can happen.
Hitting down on it does not create more spin, which was a long-time fallacy. When I was a kid, we thought you hit down on it to spin it more. It is not true. You don't hit down on it to hit it. And you don't move the ball back to hit it low, because then you'll just instinctively hang back and hit a worse shot with a lousy golf swing.
Yeah, as a general comment, putting the ball back to hit it low is the same thing as saying punch down to make a puck go up. Doesn't make sense, right? The more you hit down onto something, the worse you're hitting it. So you have to make sure you hit it shallow, and that's where the leading the hands and the keeping the loft down while not hitting down more on it actually flights the ball lower and decreases your launch angle.
And if you think about it, everyone, I don't know what else we could use as a chaser, but if you want to stay low, you have to have a low finish.
Yeah.
So moving it way forward, I'm not recommending people do that, but sometimes I teach people who lift and don't get onto their lead leg and kind of top the ball. I'll move the ball 8 inches forward outside their lead foot and make them chase after it to hit it. And when you're doing that, if you think about it, the more you're moving long and low through impact, the lower the ball will go because you keep the loft off the club. Whereas when you put the ball back in your stance, you tend to just hang back and flip your hands at it, and up it goes again.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm happy to tell everybody you now have the shot.
Yes, now I can do it.
Yeah.
3-iron in my bag, I can hit a stinger finally. But
hey, one little thing, I'll tell that story just for a sec, and then we're going to move on to Solheim Cup and stuff. But yeah, you hit the golf ball low, everybody. You might want to put a little bit of weight on your lead leg. So instead of with a driver normally 52 back leg, 48 front leg, you might go 55 front leg just to make sure you're on top of the ball a little more.
Yeah, well, it gives you more of a pivot post at the front. So there's less required lateral movement of the golf ball, less odds your head falls back, and it kind of keeps your hands more forward.
Yeah, and
it's actually not a bad trick when you're around the greens, to go back to that for a second too. If you're struggling with your pitching, putting yourself onto your front leg a little bit more, even on a pitch shot, to make it so that there's less unnecessary movement is sometimes a good thing in all of these conditions.
The ball will
come
down. The ball will come down a little bit, and with wet turf, right, in the fall, maybe putting 60-40 weight on your front leg when you're pitching might help. But what do you do with the ball position? I move my ball back maybe an inch, but no more than that. I keep it forward. It's normally off my front heel. I might put it under my armpit.
With the driver, you mean, to be
clear?
With
the driver, yeah. Yeah, to hit that low driver that you don't hit, that starts at Waterville and ends up at Ballybunion, which makes me laugh and laugh and laugh.
Looking back, it was funny. It wasn't funny when it was happening.
Oh, it was really funny. It was except for the $6 Pro Vs you were just throwing out like they were coming out of a Pez dispenser. Anyway, there's something wrong with me that I have such joy that you were miserable that day.
Oh, well. No, I had a great time. It just didn't go well. Didn't keep score.
Anyway, ball back maybe an inch, a little more weight on the front leg. That chaser low finish, you see Tiger hit that stinger. If you really let that club go way up in the air, that's a true indicator that you're adding loft through impact, so you don't want to do that either. And by the time you hit impact with that drive, I would say you want about a feeling of about 70% of your weight on your front leg, which is not normal for a driver. But you just kind of punch it lower out there. And playing on fescue was so fun. It drains so well, the ground's so hard, it'll roll 300 yards. If you hit it solid 200 in the air, it'll roll another 100 yards. It's crazy.
It'll roll a lot. And I mean, we've espoused on the podcast before about how people need to hit it higher, because most people think I'm going to roll it a ton and you get more height in the air. But if you hit it properly and hit that stinger kind of drive or with a wood or a long iron properly, even in Parkland Golf, it will roll and you'll get more than you think out of it. Yeah. It's clearly a better shot in the links format. It's a more versatile, useful shot there. But in the wind here, keeping the ball down a little bit, because you're not going to be affected by the wind, it's a very good shot to have in your toolbox.
All right, because I'm so excited about Ireland, because I'm having such a kick out of remembering your wonderful shots, I want to talk about what happened. Remember what happened the first time I went to Ireland? You can make fun of me now. The first tee at La Hinge. Tell everybody what happened.
So I remember we get to La Hinge, and you have 15 clubs in your bag.
We land at 6 a.m.
6 a.m. And I remember being in the parking lot and you saying to me, I don't know which club to take out. I can't figure out which one's going to be good for links yet. I'm just going to keep 15 clubs in my bag. And I remember walking up to the tee, and we took a caddy the first round just to experience it. And the caddy put your clubs down. I remember you saying to him, I have 15 clubs. I know that's not right. I hope it's okay. It's my first time in Ireland. I just want to see what clubs I use. I remember the caddy going, oh, no big deal, whatever. And he takes the driver cover off your driver, and the head goes with it. And he goes, well, I guess you don't have that problem anymore. You got 14 clubs anyway.
Air Canada broke my driver on the way over. And you literally, I mean, everyone does this, I guess. You take the red eye over there. You leave at like 6 p.m. from Boston, or go through St. John's, through Ottawa or Toronto, or whatever you do. And you land at 6, and you get on your coach, and you go wherever, and you're on the tee at 9:30. And I've waited my whole... Now, I'm at the time, I'm 50 years old.
Yeah.
I've been waited my whole life to go over there. And I'm on the first tee at the top 50 course in the world, and I don't have a driver. And so I tried to hit yours, and
That went well.
I almost seized my back. I hit a little snap hook about 150 yards because your extra stiff 80-gram shaft, I couldn't even get it airborne. So then I hit my 3-wood, and I hit my 3-wood for the front 9. And pissed off that I didn't have a driver, and I was over there. Didn't know what to do because you go over there, and it's like it's rural Canada. It's like being in Carp if you're here in Ottawa.
No, there's no golf town to go get another driver quickly. No.
So I got this club. So I called my ping rep. I'm on the course dialing up the ping rep. Can you send me a shaft? And it was a mess. Anyway, at the 9th hole, I don't know if you said it or Mom said it or I said it, but said, you know what? I'm going to put my driver head on my 3-wood because there's a massive difference between using a short-shafted driver for look and feel and launch and everything than using a 3-wood head. It just doesn't have the mass and everything behind it, and you can't tee the ball up as high. And so I put the driver head on the 3-wood shaft.
And the 3-wood head on the 5-wood shaft.
And I hit the ball great that week.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we're back to ego, and that was a revolutionary thing for me, even as a fitter. And I've been fitting now since 1992, and this was only in 2014.
Yeah.
But you and I came home and ordered all kinds of different shorter shafts for our ping cart and for our fitting cart.
And I would say it is shocking what percentage of people we fit for shorter drivers now.
Yeah.
One thing
I would fit that in. I would fit that into the ego category. People all want the longest possible driver to get every inch. Now, I will say this. The only problem I had that week, and for those of you who are dabble in club fitting or in, you're those little techie guys who are on all those websites like GolfWorks and checking out the weights and the torques of every shaft and everything. When you shorten a club to 43 inches from 45 and a quarter, which were my specs at the time, every time you take half an inch off a golf club, you use about 3 swing weight points with the effective weight of the club or the feel, grip versus head.
And so just a quick aside for people who don't know what we mean by swing weight. Your club has 2 weights attached to it. The static weight, what it physically weighs if you put it on a scale, and the swing weight, which is how heavy it feels when you swing. That's why you swing some drivers, you say, oh, the head feels light in this driver. I've had people actually, when we're fitting, I give them a heavier golf shaft and they say the club feels lighter because they're noticing the head feels lighter relative to the shaft.
Yeah.
And there is a weight.
Or a whippy club sometimes will feel heavier because you feel the head more.
Absolutely. So there's a weight attached to how it swings, and drivers are finely tuned to be proper with the shafts that they're made for. And as, like you're saying, right, when you shorten the shaft that much, it changes it.
So 3 swing weight points. So, I mean, it was my normal swing weight on my driver that I like is a D1. It's slightly lighter than typical in the industry is about a D3. There's a swing weight. There's a swing weight scale, right? So D3 is typical in the industry. I like about a D1. This thing was swinging out at about a C, which is like light. Most ladies' clubs are in the mid-Cs. So it's light. It was too light. But what was so interesting is I hit such centered shots because it was shorter. And I could feel like I get my arms in front of me better. I was more connected at impact. It was easier to square the face.
Yeah.
Right? So I hit really solid shots all week, and I might have overall lost 5 to 8 yards of distance.
If that. Yeah, if that.
But I hit a lot of fairways, and I had a really easy time hitting the ball squarely. And so, I mean, we've been fitting for 3 decades now. I wouldn't say we never trimmed a club half an inch. But it wasn't until I went to Ireland and went through that personal process that I even thought of the idea of saying, hey, why don't we take 1.5 inches off this driver and see what happens?
Well,
and some people swing them quicker because they hit the center of the sweet spot more often, and they're more aggressive because they feel like they can square the club up.
So here's, for context, as we talk about fighting it through windows and how tour players do that and how you should be doing more of it, and it's so important in fall. The average driver in the market is 45 3/4 inches to 45.5, depending on the company. The driver standard on tour is 44.5. So it's 1 inch to 1.25 inches shorter than the industry market average. And that's because the club companies understand that if you give somebody more length, they can potentially hit the ball farther. So as a general idea, they lengthen the shaft, and for whatever reason, they've come to the conclusion that 43.5 or 1/4 inches, or 45 3/4 inches is the one that we can all handle. That's kind of as long as it can get before we all start losing control. On the other side of it, the tour pros take the shorter shafts because it allows them to flight the ball the way they want to for the same reasons you just described.
Square impact.
If they maybe lose 1 or 2 miles an hour of clubhead speed, which many don't, then they gain that back in ball speed. So many of the tour players hit it as far or farther with the shorter shafts, but like you said, they flight the ball better, they control the ball better, and it really, really, really is something that is ubiquitous across the tour. I mean, Jimmy Walker.
You never know. Yeah, Jimmy Walker. I was just going to, by the way, he was on, it was such a weird thing. We're prepping for this show, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about Jimmy Walker as an example, and he's on with Gary Williams on the Golf Channel this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's back. He's working on some swing
That's
changes.
Funny.
But he was 42 and a half
when he won the PGA.
5 wood length.
And Ricky Fowler is a 43, and there's a lot of guys that are even shorter. That 43 length shaft Ricky has is the one you were talking about in Ireland. Now, clearly, I'm sure
it's weighted properly.
They swing weight his club differently to make sure it works, but it really is an interesting thing to try to flight that ball properly.
For those of you on the internet and the deep, dark golf internet, if he's using a 43 and a quarter right now, whatever, we're just, the guys change week to week. But generally speaking, Tiger has basically been 44 for most of his career, and I know Justin Rose was the same. And so just consider a shorter shaft, and I had that neat Irish experience. All right, speaking of neat experiences in Europe, Solheim Cup. Have we answered everything? Have we answered everything for fall golf?
Yes.
I mean, no one asked a question, so we're not answering anything. But have we given all the details, I think? We've talked about a little more aggressive putting, a little more aggressive short game, softer turf, how to flight the ball low, how
use
to
more club.
Use more club. I'm pretty comfortable. Layering with clothing, I think that might be waterproof shoes, huge.
Yep.
Layering with clothing because you will go from super freezing in the morning until maybe warm in the afternoon, and thin, permanent press or poly layers. Cotton isn't great for heaviness if you want to keep swinging at top speed. Put a little kind of Under Armour wicking shirt over top of a wind shirt, over top of something else, and get yourself dressed the right way. It helps a lot. All right, now back to the Solheim Cup. Let's actually, it's a bizarro reverse show. Normally we do our what happened on the tour at the start of the show, but we dove right in. I was so excited about Ireland. It's been 2 weeks since our last podcast.
I mean, last time we talked about
Bmw Championship, Solheim Cup,
a
couple of things going on. Patrick Reed over in Europe playing. It's interesting to see some of the Americans. Billy Horschel was playing at the Bmw Championship. Big event. I think that Bmw Championship to Europe is as big as the Players Championship. That's their biggie, right?
Well, you know what is interesting, too, is it's making the American players more likely to go over to these events and making those events even bigger.
I know.
I mean, we talked about how the format change last season was bad for PGA Tour events between majors. I wonder if this is going to make it a step in direction towards more of a world tour.
Absolutely is. But this was a Rolex Series event. Danny Willett won the BMW Championship. Great to see him back
with a great final round.
With a great final round, playing with John Rahm, who everyone always picks and sometimes gets it done, sometimes doesn't. Rahm has won more Rolex Series events than any player. Race to Dubai coming up. Rory McIlroy over there, Patrick Reed over there, Willett and Rahm in the final round. I mean, that's worth watching for all of us golfers who may want to watch football when our team's playing, but don't think the NFL should kick.
Oh, it was great. It was a great watch.
Kick golf to the curb. Danny Willett, I love a comeback story. As a competitive player myself, who got to a certain, NCAA level and professional golf, and God, I hate it when someone misses a putt to lose something, and I just love it when guys redeem themselves. And this game will just grab you by your throat and shake you. And sometimes we're all going to deal with it. If you're out there struggling right now, get yourself to a video camera, take some lessons, work your way through your yips. Don't give up. It's a great challenge. But Willett, with back problems and swing issues, has been through a lot since his win at the Masters in 2016. And now you look at his wins, and he's becoming a serious name in golf. But had he have disappeared after not winning the after the Masters, you would have thought it was a fluky Ben Curtis type win of the Open Championship, right?
What I like about Danny Willett is that he clearly is able to step up and rise to the moment when the moment presents itself, right? Between the Masters, this time shooting a 67 in the final round to win by 3. Clearly, when he gets the opportunity, he's not afraid to take the moment, right? Like sometimes you watch tour events in the European Tour and in the PGA Tour where the guy plays so well the first 3 days that he kind of plays okay the last day and he holds on, right? But he didn't do that here. I think it's really cool to watch guys who take the victory.
Danny Willett had a quote, which I loved, and we're going to use it in our junior coaching. I'm really working at becoming more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's the secret to golf. Now, the greats embrace the uncomfortable situations. I had your uncle on the radio, again, on Tee It Up on DSN 1200 this week. And we were talking about pressure because of the Solheim Cup and Suzanne Pettersson's putt, which we'll get to in a minute. We'll get to in a minute. But what John said, and I just love it, and for those who don't know, John played all around the world in Asia and Australia, and he works with top athletes now on emotional intelligence. And, you know, whether it's hockey or whether it's equestrian, he works with squash players, everyone. One of the things he coaches all the young kids on is that great athletes think pressure is a privilege. You know, why do you practice? Why do you change your swing? Why do you take lessons? You do all of those things to then get in a situation where it matters to see if it's all going to pay off. That's the fun of sport, really. And great athletes think it's a privilege to be in that situation. This is what they live for. You know, Tiger Woods, how many times do you hear Tiger Woods say, this is fun? This is really fun. You know, and everyone else is like, fun? It doesn't look fun. You're grinding it out there in the U.S. Open, but that's why he works, is to try to win, W's as he used to call them. It's a privilege, right? And if you can get yourself to a position where instead of being terrified, we had a young girl play in a CN Future Links event this week. Little 13-year-old girl. I think it's clear to say she was pooping her pants before the event. You know, I mean, She was so nervous. She literally almost couldn't even practice. She was so nervous thinking about what it was going to be. And we were trying to talk her off the ledge, saying it's just another event and every kid's the same there and you've worked hard, so you just go and enjoy the moment. It's not really anything more than another tournament with a bunch of little girls, right? Like, don't worry, you'll be fine. And she ended up doing okay. She didn't win the thing because I think her insecurities and her nerves really affected. She started double, triple at the tournament, which then would have freaked her out, but steadied the ship, had a pretty good
rest of the tournament.
Had a pretty good event. But it's interesting, right? If you're not in tune with yourself, you don't believe in yourself and your effort, and she should. She's a hard practicer. She's a great young player, by the way. Great young player. But greats really think pressure is the place they want to be. Other people work to
survive it.
Yeah, and I was going to say to thrive in it and then survive it, and then other people can't deal with it. So it's a question of where you are, and it's the amount of work you put in, how much you understand yourself, how strategic you are on the golf course, how much you can control your body that affects where you end up.
Well, and as Danny Willett implied, it's a learned skill too, or it can be. Some people are natural-born killers.
Don't panic if
right?
you get nervous and you're not that good.
Tiger, I'd put Brooke Henderson in that category. I would put
any greats, Jack Nicklaus.
Brooks Koepka, clearly. I mean, there are people that you can just tell when the moment presents itself, they jump at the opportunity and they can kill the competition. And there's some people who have to learn to do that, but you can learn to do that with a little bit of work.
It's a learned skill for sure, it is. Which brings us to the end of our podcast and a culminating moment. Suzanne Pettersson makes a 7-foot putt to win the Solheim Cup in Europe.
And then effectively drops the mic.
Drops the mic and says, that's it with competitive golf for me.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a better way to kind of, just...
unbelievable.
Finish off the career. Pretty cool.
And what's really interesting about the way the Solheim Cup went too, I mean, it ended up obviously being incredibly fun to watch. I mean, they couldn't have
was a good
scripted
event.
a better finishing effort of everything coming down to one putt at the end, right? But we were talking in the last podcast about 2 points. Number one, how Suzanne Pettersson hadn't done nearly as much since the last Solheim Cup, which frankly was a bit of a controversy, and
Yeah, sure
she
was.
didn't come out looking that good. And the second thing we said was it was really interesting to see how many veterans that the European women's team chose that weren't near the rankings on points. And if you look at it, Pettersson making that putt, being the killer on the last hole, and then Anna Norquist finishing at the last match 4-3 and kind of wiping Morgan Pressel off the page, set Europe up to come back and win those last 3 matches and win the thing. I mean, that strategy clearly paid off. And
sometimes it will, sometimes
super fun
it
to
won't.
watch.
You know, Suzanne Pettersson's coming off maternity leave and hasn't been playing very much. And anyway, I love, as I said, the redemption story for Willett, and then watching her kind of put that exclamation point off, what has been a great career. She's been despite a little controversy in the Solheim Cup, she's been a great role model for women's golf too. She's extremely fit. She's been really, if you think about it, the LPGA, Annika, great player. There have been some great players. Suzanne Pettersson was an athlete, right? And a Nike athlete. And I guess Michelle Wie to a certain degree as well. But Suzanne Pettersson's done a lot for the ladies' game over the last long time, and it was awesome to see that. And, you know, we were saying too, Jake, and I know we talked on the radio about it, but great competition is just competition where everybody lives and breathes every shot and every moment, and you're on the verge of tears and incredible excitement based on what happens with every shot, you know, as a player. And it was great TV. It was riveting television. It was awesome stuff. They sure had trouble with the big wind. We talked about winds earlier in the podcast. They had trouble with the big winds.
The second day really.
It was something. 40-mile-an-hour winds at Glen Eagles at times. But it was a great show. And I loved her making that putt to kind of end her career.
Yeah,
what a way to go. Your uncle, again, was talking about, you know, the privilege of pressure and everything. And I said, what do you think of her walking away? Like just doing that and just dropping the mic, as you said. And he said, I think it's great. People have to know and be brave enough to change careers.
Yeah.
And to know when they've done enough in a certain thing. And the guys on the Champions Tour just keep traveling around and staying in hotels. I know they're well paid. It's maybe all they know. But after a while, it's like, okay, Jeff Sluman and Scott McCarron, you know, that's enough. But I don't know. Do you think it's admirable when someone can walk away at the top? I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do too. And
we're going to miss.
Especially if it's right for them. I mean, Suzanne Pettersson's an example. I think it's different if someone is at the top at 25 years old and walks away. I think that's it. I would feel differently about that. Because,
well, you feel cheated because you could have watched more.
And there's potential there, and you know that they didn't do what they were able to do in the sport. Someone like Suzanne Pettersson, who's had a long, illustrious career and would be considered an LPGA Tour legend, especially on the European side, managing to do something like that and then use that as a catalyst to say, look, I'm on the top now, I'm done, because she recognizes that she's probably not going to have that many opportunities to do that kind of thing in golf. That I do admire. I think knowing when you're done.
Safe to say she never would again.
Making your mark.
How many golfers have the chance to win the Solheim or Ryder Cup with a putt of theirs, with everyone watching? You know,
very few.
Safe to say, yeah.
It's very few, and you know that's when it gets to territory to someone like Phil Mickelson. When does Phil Mickelson call it quits? Right? I think Phil Mickelson is still competing. He still deserves to be on tour. I'm not saying he's overstaying his welcome and he should be quitting. But when you're someone who's as big to the tour, like Suzanne Pettersson, like Phil Mickelson, like these stalwart long-term greats, when do you make the call? And I think Suzanne Pettersson did it right.
Nice to see her make the putt, too. She could have missed the putt and retired. You know, golf is so difficult. You're out there by yourself. No one else is going to tap the puck in or finish the play for you. And so important for all of you listening, you know, not to get bogged down when you're playing with the distractions. Stay focused on the task. Stay in your routine. That's why routine is so important in golf. You have to be rhythmic about it. You have to approach every shot the same way. You have to think the same way over every shot. You've got to keep your mind completely in the present at the task in front of you, which is to bring that putter back and through to hit that 7-footer where you want to hit it, and nothing else in the world matters. And it's so hard to do, and I'm so thrilled for her that she could do that, because we can all think back to Scott Hoke missing the putt in the playoff at the Masters, or you can think yourself of a putt you made or missed that was important in your life. And I just can't tell you, when people put them, as I said earlier, some people won't put themselves out there. When people put themselves out there, basically naked on the smallest of tree limbs in the wind, and when they pull it off, it's fantastic to watch.
It's also, I think, personally the most rewarding moments, right? That's the reason we talked a lot about ego in the first half and how some people aren't willing to get their ego bruised, but risking that and then getting that reward is what makes the pursuit of the sport worth it. And I think that golf is unique in that it's so frustrating and difficult, and it is such a never-ending challenge that the pursuit of greatness over time is its best attribute. I think that's why Arnold Palmer was so beloved. He never stopped trying to improve until the day he died. And I think that, yeah,
that's admirable too. It's funny. You look at Tom Brady. Do we want Tom Brady to keep going until he's kind of gets traded and plays that last year
it's
like
a different
Brett
sport.
Favre?
No, I don't. It's a different sport.
Yeah, no, but it's the same thing. But yeah, we admire Arnold's constant chase. Anyway, enough said. I'm off to Ireland. You're off to Cabot. We'll have a lot to talk about next podcast.
A ton. We'll have a ton to talk about. It'll be fun.
I am going to hit the ball so great in Ireland. I can't wait for every shot. That's how you got to go into your game, everyone. You don't go in scared. You don't go in nervous. You go in there just thinking that it's going to be so fun. And I know that I'm going to end up in places that I will not end up in North America. I'll have one foot down a rabbit hole and thistle up my leg, but it'll be fun. It'll be challenging. I love links golf too. It forces you to stay in the present because every shot matters, right? You got 76 little pot bunkers out there, and you got to find a way to get your ball between them all, and it's so fun. Same at Cabot. You're going to have maybe some weather out there.
That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Keep the ball down.
I will.
Don't hit those pop-up spinners.
No, I got it now. It'll be good.
You hit the ball so hard. I mean, you could hit 6-iron off every tee.
I'm not sure that's true.
I'm just leaving you stuff to think about. I don't know if I'm getting in your kitchen or helping you.
No, you're not getting in my kitchen. It'll be a blast. It's all good.
I don't need to get in your kitchen. I'm not going to be there. All right, everybody. That's a great show. Hope we helped you with your fall golf and with your flighting of the golf ball and thinking a little bit about things. And lots more fun stuff on our next podcast when I'm home from Ireland and Jake's home from Cabot.